This past Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation, host Margaret Brennan interviewed U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and regarding Vice President J.D. Vance's speech at the Munich Security Conference that came up in the conversation. And what Brennan had to say about it, frankly, it was shocking, although perhaps not surprising.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide.
Well, I have to disagree with you.
Specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none.
Good for him for pushing back. So why does the left have such a beef with free speech? Well, here now to discuss this, Mary Hasson. She's the Kate O'Brien Senior Fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Mary, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Tony. Good to be here.
So, Mary, why does the left have such a significant issue with free speech?
I think part of it is they've lost their sense of moral clarity, because if you don't have a sense of what's good, what's right, what's true, and you don't understand speech as being part of that search for the truth, then it's all about power. And that's what we see here. Even the way she responded there or set up the question, she said, they weaponize free speech as if Nazi Germany was nothing more than a power play by a bad guy, as opposed to false ideas, wrong ideas, and the need for free speech to be able to push back against that. But of course, the Nazis squelched that. So it's when you lose your moral clarity, when you no longer appreciate the truth or even the sense that there is a truth, then it's all about maintaining your power. And that's where censorship comes in.
So it's got up is down is up, good is evil, evil is good. I mean, how do you assert that Nazi Germany was the product of free speech? I mean, to your point, it was the opposite. They suppressed any type of voice that was counter or would hold them into account for anything was punished.
Yeah, I think it's a lack of moral clarity, but also a weakness of political will. So if you think about what's happened in Germany itself, where Germany, like the Scandinavian countries, has really had a terrible problem with criminal migrants, and their crime has spiked. And yet here they are spending all this energy trying to police what people are saying, and yet they're doing a very poor job of policing criminality and actually protecting their own people, because they're no longer willing to call some things wrong and some things right.
Right. And you know about this firsthand. I mean, you co-founded and directed the Person and Identity Project, which equips parents and faith-based institutions to promote the truth about the human person and counter this radical gender ideology. That is a prime example of where the left tries to shut down the freedom of speech, because their ideas, this is my take on it, their ideas are indefensible, so they don't want to be challenged by free speech.
Right, and they turn it into a personal thing. So, for example, I was recently speaking at ASU, and there was a segment of people among the faculty and students who protested my mere presence, even though I wasn't there to talk about gender ideology per se. But they framed it as something personal. In other words, I must be hateful because I disagreed with them. They were in danger and they were fearful and not safe because of my ideas. And so there's a sense of trying to protect themselves from hurt feelings or from having their ideas challenged. And that's not how you arrive at the truth. That's not how we have a free society, where we know what's good and what's true, but we want to have this open conversation to be able to persuade others. But when you're simply trying to avoid feeling bad, you don't want to hear what other people have to say.
Right. And I mean, the freedom of speech, which is a part of our First Amendment freedoms, is critical. It's it's kind of a pressure valve. If you remember the old, my grandmother used to can, and she would have those pressure cookers, and when it was done, the thing would blow off a little bit of steam, and it kept it from breaking or blowing up. And I think that's what free speech is to a society like ours. It allows people to vent, it allows people to express themselves. And when that is short circuited or suppressed, that's when we have real problems.
Right, I completely agree with you. And in fact, if you look back at the societies or political regimes that have suppressed free speech, I mean, they can't stop people from thinking or seeking the truth or trying to share that truth with others. It all goes underground, and then you're going to have a rebellion, a revolt, and at least in terms of the Iron Curtain and other regimes, we've had success in terms of freedom being restored. But for these countries in Europe to look at that historical example and say, the way to protect ourselves is to prevent people from speaking, from, as you say, blowing off a little bit of pressure, but really surfacing the issues of the day. That's how you solve problems.
Right.
So there's no desire really to solve those problems or to hear what the complaints are even.
We need more speech, not less, in my view. So, Mary, final question for you. How can those of us who cherish this First Amendment freedom work together, growing America's respect for this freedom? Because I'll tell you, some of the research, some of the polling data I've seen is that some of the younger generation, they don't have a healthy understanding of the importance of the First Amendment.
Yeah, and that's exactly true. And again, I think part of it goes back to this idea that they've come to believe that they are too fragile to hear ideas that they disagree with, or that make them uncomfortable. In fact, that was one of the quotes from one of the people interviewed by CBS in 2 days after J.D. Vance's speech on their 60 Minutes program. They were interviewing people in Germany about their hate speech and suppression of speech. And they were talking about how it makes people uncomfortable to hear certain viewpoints. So what do we need to do? I think we need to be bold and to speak the truth and to encourage our children to be resilient, to understand that they can and should engage with ideas that they disagree with or people who are very different from them, to listen, to engage, but then to be confident in speaking the truth. It's that self-censorship sometimes that I think is most challenging.
I think you're absolutely right. It is, and that's a very dangerous thing. Mary, I want to thank you for joining us. Always great to have you on the program. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you so much.